Hello guys, welcome to another video. Now with the league start coming up, I thought I'd make a video discussing something that I think I'll be league starting this time around. And this video is going to be a bit more of a dive on the mechanics at play here rather than any sort of build guide. So Scorching Ray is a channeling ability that deals fire damage over time, and it does this by applying stages of a debuff to enemies caught in the beam. Debuff stages are gained based on cast time intervals, and each debuff deals its own damage and has its own duration, but the duration only starts expiring when an enemy leaves the beam. Each debuff stage adds 60% of the base damage, and if an enemy stays in the beam long enough to reach 8 debuff stages, fire exposure is inflicted at a magnitude of minus 25% to fire resistance. Now, Scorching Ray has another rather unique mechanic attached to it which allows beams from different entities to deal damage simultaneously, which is why Scorching Ray totems have been a thing in the past. And this is an intended mechanic, it's not a bug, and it's been in the game in fact since the initial inception of Scorching Ray back in patch 2.4.2. Here's an official GGG post from around the time of patch 2.4.2 in 2016, which is a bit of a Q&A, and in this post they discussed Scorching Ray specifying that it couldn't exceed minus 24% to fire resistance if that was the maximum a single beam could do. And to this question they say, this is so that if you have multiple players or totems using Scorching Ray, it can't exceed minus 24%. Each Scorching Ray debuff on an enemy can have 8 stages. An entity can be affected by multiple Scorching Ray debuffs at a time from different beams. They'll all apply their damage over time based on their individual stages, but the total fire resistance penalty from all of the debuffs on a particular enemy cannot exceed minus 24%. There's also a more recent post from Mark, not that one, yep, that one, talking about Scorching Ray on Reddit. There was a question asking if Scorching Ray is an exception with regards to similar mechanics. Is it intentional that its burns stack with each other, for example when running multiple totems? Because it's known that Searing Bond doesn't stack. What's the difference between the two? And Mark says, yes, it's intentional that Scorching Ray deviates from the standard behaviour by having one debuff from each entity channeling the skill take effect, rather than just one overall. Now in the past, this mechanic has only really been relevant for the case of using Scorching Ray totems in a standard totem build setup, where you try to max out as many totems as possible, and this makes sense because Scorching Ray deals the most damage when it gains all of its stages. If the totem's been long enough to gain 8 stages, it will deal the maximum damage that it's capable of, which is a lot more than just the base 1 stage because it gains so much damage from extra stages. However, we now have a transfigured version of Scorching Ray, that's Scorching Ray of Immolation. This gem is significantly different in terms of the numbers from its original counterpart, but it shares the same mechanics. Scorching Ray of Immolation has far more front-loaded damage, relying a lot less on gaining stages to deal decent damage. It also has double the base duration, and doesn't have the fire exposure at maximum stages. By using this version of Scorching Ray, you can scale the damage in a way that wasn't possible with the original gem. And this is by having totems inflict their beam debuff right before resummoning them again to inflict new debuffs, and so on and so forth. This way, you can scale the duration of the debuff that lasts when an enemy leaves the beam, and scale your totem placement speed to achieve a ramping damage over time which is somewhat similar to poison. In fact, you even make use of temporal chain since Scorching Ray's damage component is considered to be a debuff which persists on the enemy, and it is affected by Temporal Chain's slower expiry mechanic. So let's look at an example. Let's say a character is using Ancestral Bond and multiple totems for 4 maximum totems. And let's just take the damage of a level 20 Scorching Ray of Immolation, which is 1840 fire damage per second. Each additional stage past the first adds 10% of base damage, so at 8 stages the beam would deal 3128 fire damage per second. So if we add 4 totems that each reach 8 stages, which takes a bit of time to ramp up, that's 12,512 fire damage per second. Okay, so that's if we were to just summon the 4 totems and let them do their thing. What about if we continuously replace the totems, allowing them to apply their debuff before being despawned and replaced? If we just take the base stats for totem placement speed, which is 0.6 seconds, and the duration of Scorching Ray of Immolation, which is 3 seconds, you'll have 4 totems active before the duration window begins, since the debuff duration only starts expiring once the enemy leaves the beam. Therefore, you'd be able to place about 1.66 sets of totems each second. 2 totems are spawned each cast, for a total of 10 totems within the 3-second window. Which means that theoretically, you could get 14 debuffs dealing damage simultaneously for a total of 25,760 fire damage per second. That's over double damage compared to the 4 totems reaching maximum stages. However, this is the maximum theoretical debuffs, and the more realistic amount would be 10 for a total of 18,400 fire damage per second, which is still about 50% more damage. And the reason that 14 debuffs is not very realistic is, firstly, it assumes that you're standing in place only resummoning totems, which is not practical in real gameplay. But also, totems have an arming time. They don't immediately use their ability. There is a small window after you summon them, and this means that the final 2 totems that you summoned would miss that 3-second window. Here's an in-game example of the tech in action. You can see firstly this unique mob here taking damage from 4 summoned totems which all reach their maximum stages, and you can see how much damage it's dealing. And now we're using temporal chains to extend the duration of the skill. We also have some duration on the passive skill tree, and you can begin to see in the footage here how much damage starts to ramp when resummoning the totems, as the amount of persistent debuffs is increasing. This is with a level 1 gem, by the way. So let's do a bit of Theorycraft discussion. I think to make use of this tech, you're going to want to invest into duration, but you don't want to go too heavy into duration because it's basically increasing your maximum potential damage output, but it's also increasing the ramp time. You'll need a good balance between scaling damage normally through increases, more multipliers, and damage over time multipliers, and scaling skill effect duration. I think a single duration wheel on the passive tree combined with the more skill effect duration mastery will be good, along with efficacy and malevolence. This will bring the 3-second base duration up to around 6.2 seconds, and temporal change is then essentially a multiplier on top of that duration, which will bring the actual debuff duration to just over 8.2 seconds. Okay, there's also the issue of totem placement speed versus maximum totems, and the time it takes for a totem to begin using its ability. Resummoning totems will despawn the oldest totems first, so having access to additional maximum totems is potentially a great thing to have in this build, in the case where you get the opportunity to spam your totems for maximum damage ramp in a boss fight. If you have a low maximum totem limit, depending on your totem placement speed, you may despawn the totems before they've applied their debuff. So in terms of ascendancy choice, Hierophant will be able to overcome this problem by reaching 6 maximum totems, 1 from Ancestral Bond, 1 from the Ascendancy, 1 from a Shaper Shield, and 2 from multiple totem support. This way you'd have 3 cycles of totems, providing a larger window for each set of totems to apply their debuff. However, one of the biggest problems with Scorching Ray totems is map clear, as the totem's AI often locks onto targets and there's some straggling mobs that are left unchecked. In this case, the Chieftain's Hinakora notable may be able to provide a much better map clear with its explosions, and Chieftain also has the upside of Ramako, which makes the use of temporal chains easier as you don't need to worry about flammability, not to mention Chieftain's tankiness. I'm currently heavily considering league starting Scorching Ray of Immolation totems, but I haven't yet decided on an ascendancy or league. I am considering playing Hardcore Trade, as I know there's going to be a decent amount of players in that league, with Scissoran pushing for players to join. What about you? What are you going to league start in Necropolis? Let me know by commenting below. Thank you to my patrons for your ongoing support, I appreciate you, and if you'd like to join them and support this channel, you can find out all of the information over on Patreon. The link is in the description below. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.